on YouTube with ads. So
What is?
super serious. Have you seen Kung Pao? The movie Kung Pao?
Mm, no, I have not.
No. Oh
Um,
man.
Apparently, I'm not living my best life now.
It's yeah, apparently not because that's a lot of nuts.
I
With the
meant
video
to
games.
ask
Uh-huh.
people in the Facebook group and Discord and stuff about like any context or baggage or anything, but maybe next time I'll remember. But I did not.
Oh.
Because I was just gonna say like what like without like talking about like any narrative stuff,
Hmm.
like do you have any sort of like contextual touch points for the God of War, 2018 or whatever.
I mean, yeah, not outside of quitting the first game and then um just being a dad. And so like
Me.
seeing those threads in well, and that's what and we don't have to necessarily get into this episode, but that's kind of what I was getting at when I mentioned to you like playing through Final Fantasy X. They sort of touch on some of the same themes at times, except
Mhm.
that God of War is very focused on that because you see it in multiple parental child relationships,
Well,
and you
it's
see
not
the
like a completely like the parental like strife sort
Mhm.
of. I think and honestly, and we can get into this. The more interesting part is just what they do with like the way that they turn. It's not just like angry Kratos smash. It's like
Mhm.
it's a much more nuanced approach to this character, which
Right.
is pretty rad. I mean, like the dad and son thing is definitely like a part of that, but yeah. So,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
anyways,
Yep. I guess yeah. The only other thing is that I said that I quit the first game, but I have watched. I think they were like videos from the completionist or something like that. I haven't watched that much
dude,
on the series, but I have like I know kind of the overall story of the
they're
series going
fine.
into this one.
I
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things where narratively, it's like okay, they're very '90s games, like
Yeah.
very like '90s aughts era games, where it's like
Video game equivalent of a shock, well, of shock rock. I was gonna say a shock jock, but just
yeah,
shock
but
rock,
no,
just like
yeah, it's like it's kind of like it's edgy.
Lucifer. Yes,
There's
yes.
there's
Edgelord.
pixelated boobs.
Yep.
You're gonna
Mhm.
like rip out this giant's eyeballs,
Mhm.
and it's like at the time it was fine. Like it's like one of those things I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, and it's the originals are very like arcadey, but
Yes. Yeah.
whereas I think this one has like some of those same elements, but well, and again, we can save some of that for whatever.
Yeah.
But I thought like if we just tonight we covered the context, and then what we could do is um, this week I'll sort of look at it and say like we'll look at sort of like the narrative flow or breakdown, and like if it
Okay.
has three acts, like and it all depends on like how much we think we can cover per episode.
Hmm.
But I feel like and this is something I've sort of been feeling for a while, and I don't always like no, I didn't always know how to address it, but I feel like sometimes like we come in and we just sort of like, especially like the Dragon Quest V game, like we
Hmm.
could episode, like we could spend like way more time on that,
Yeah.
and what I'd like to do is like because there's a lot of like personal history and context that's enmeshed in a lot of this stuff that
Hmm.
I think like we can actually have like meaningful conversation on. But there's also like sometimes it is like you do want to talk about like the narrative flow and story beats and stuff like that, and so instead of trying to cram all of that into a, an episode,
Hmm.
it's like why don't we just sort of like chunk out like the first episode, especially on meteor games, we can just say like okay, let's talk about like our context, personal baggage, history with the series, or just like even like while we were playing this series, like some of the stuff that like emotionally or psychologically like we were like kind of like, oh, like we do, and it like in a lot of ways, this is all us just sort of talking about our context.
Hmm.
Like it's more or less about, it's not even, it doesn't have to be spoiler free, but it's also not intrinsically spoiler
Hmm.
e. It's more of
Hmm.
just saying like, hey, like, when I was playing, like, and if you want to talk about like the context of a certain moment or whatever, but then I was thinking next episode we could talk about some of the, like, we could look at like, it would give us a couple weeks to look at like the different acts and stuff like that, and look at
Hmm.
some of the, you know what I'm saying, and just like
Oh
gather
yeah.
some thoughts on. So does that
Yeah,
make
yeah.
sense?
That works. When would we have conversation on um like game mechanics, like this game as a game? Would that be this
That
episode
could
or would
that
that
could
be
pop into this.
okay?
That's definitely like, yeah, that's definitely like almost more like this,
Yeah.
just mechanically, and it uh, like, yeah, that would be definitely like more this episode.
Okay.
So like, this is just like, because like we're gonna talk like, this is sort of, yeah, mechanics, music, sort of the
Hmm.
visuals, etc. Like that's
Oh
stuff
man.
that we can talk about in this one because it's not necessarily spoiler heavy.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Like that's the stuff where it's like, it's sort of like almost like this is like laying the groundwork, and then like I said, next episode or next two episodes, or hopefully
Hmm.
it should, but we can just sort of talk about story beats and narrative flow and sort of like different narrative themes and stuff like that. So that's,
Cool.
at least that's sort of where my head is. But
Cool. I can dig it.
can you dig it? Apparently you can, because you said you could dig it.
I think so. It can get dug. All right.
Oh, I keep forgetting things. Like as
Yeah.
I'm like, this is why I should prepare in advance.
Yeah, it's always a good rule of thumb, but it doesn't always happen. So, okay. Welcome to the Backlog Breakdown. Today, we'd like to start off, like we usually do, with a word of wisdom from Kratos. Sorry, I can't find it. I'm going to cut this out. It was right there. Where is it?
It was right there.
Yeah, I'm like having to scroll and find it. Well, that's super annoying. Um, come on, this is so lame. Okay, I guess it must have been higher up on this little. Okay, here's where it is. Keep your expectations low, boy, and you'll never be disappointed. I find that one to be particularly poignant for the podcast. But
Yeah, well, just there is a something very relevant just in general. It's like, yeah, temper those expectations mightily in
yeah,
life. It's like if you always come in expecting the worst, when things go right, you can't help but be pleasantly surprised,
mm-hmm.
or maybe disappointed that it's not as awful as you want it to be. I don't know, man. It's like they got dark.
I was
But
trying to think like, is there like a serious philosophical like way of thought, that actually espouses that? And I'm like, that's sort of that seems a bit stoic,
yeah,
but
that
like,
the
I mean,
Stoics are
it's
sort of
basically like
like,
pessimism,
well,
just
it's
embodied.
it's a sort of a
Practical
stoic-y sort
pessimism.
of like, yeah, it's kind of just like, just, yeah. I'm sure that there's some probably like stoic, proverb or something out there that could basically be just like, yeah, lowered expectations. Uh, lowered expectations. Have you ever seen that SNL skit?
Mm-mm. No.
Those, it's like the, I think it's like the dating video ones. Um,
No.
and
But
I
that's a
can't.
very funny
I
guy.
think those are. It's like the video dating
Mhm.
sort of thing. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Nice.
I
Nice. Well,
think.
I just thought it was particularly apt for our podcast because I like to be self-deprecating. I find it to be funny. But anyways, welcome. Thanks for tuning in to episode 73 of the Backlog Breakdown. I'm your host Josh, and as you've heard, I have my wonderful co-host with me today, Mr. Nate_McKeever.
Yes, yes. Actually, funny little bit on that. I got bored on Twitter, and I was the Presbyterian for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I am now just Nate, and then the word underscore, then the word McKeever. Like
Nice.
it's three words all run together.
I like
Like
it. Any capitals in there?
just the capitals sort of like in between each letter, each
Hmm.
word. It's
Gotcha.
like, and then for my name. But it's maybe I should make them all like lowercase. That would be
I mean,
like
that would be even more
just
confusing.
just jarring and it's like what is this? What is this?
Nice. I like
Oh
it. Well,
man.
how have you been over the past couple weeks?
Um, I mean, okay, like went to my grandfather's memorial a couple weeks ago, and
Hmm.
that was kind of like, I mean, it was good. It was kind of weird because, of course, like, dude, it's coming out of like the social distancing and wearing masks and
Oh yeah.
everything else. It's like just like I go to church every Sunday, but and we mask up and we sort
Hmm.
of, but it was just so weird. And then they had like it was like snacky stuff. It was like vegetables and cheese
Okay.
and stuff. And Megan and I hadn't eaten all day, and so it was like
Hmm.
after a while, I was just like, because I was like, I'm just gonna wear my mask because I just like we haven't. And again, I'm not trying to like we haven't been vaccinated.
Hmm.
We haven't gotten it yet, but we
Okay.
also live in sort of a high, like there could be is more for the fact that like we could be asymptomatic carriers or whatever.
Hmm.
It's just like I was just like it's not going to hurt me. But then after a while I got hungry and they had
Hmm.
cookies and it's just like I just kind of was like I guess like
Yeah. One
so it's like
vegetable
I'm
or
like pulling
one
mask
cookie.
down and stuffing my face and then like and after a while it's just like after things sort of cleared out it was like but it was a nice day. I mean it was kind of weird. Um,
Yeah.
but I, I mean, other than that, just things at work, like uh, it's starting to get spring. Spring is spranging.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yep.
is sprunging. Uh,
It's a thing.
it's yeah, spring is sprunging. But yeah, just kind of looking forward. I did sit outside today. Today was my day
Mm.
off. And so at one point in time, I did sit outside and I pulled a cigar out of my
Oh,
Herfador and
you should not have paused right there. I'm just saying.
why?
Anyways,
Why should I
I
have
don't know.
not paused?
I don't know. Whenever you talk about pulling something out of your,
Oh.
that's a weird place to pause.
Wow. Wow, Josh. Wow. You're gonna have to edit that one in post, buddy. Um, no, but yeah, so I grabbed a cigar and went out and sat on my front porch and smoked for a little bit. And it was a nice enough day that like I was wearing sort of like a pullover hoodie kind of thing that I
Okay.
have,
Yeah.
but it's not. It's like just t-shirt material. I was
Yeah.
actually getting like in the sun. I was getting like a little too warm wearing that.
Yeah. Nice.
It was a nice day. But yeah, just kind of laying low, man. Just
Yeah.
I did play a big old chunk of Near Automata today,
Hmm.
but we'll get into that a little bit. Dude, I definitely think that when we're done with it, it
Hmm.
needs to go on. Like we need to dedicate a few episodes to it because
Yeah.
it's just such an interesting game that yeah there's a lot. I have a lot of thoughts, and I will try to gather some of those. I'm
Hmm.
not going to say that they'll be coherent because, frankly, sometimes that game is not coherent. Uh, it
Oh,
is.
just wait, just wait.
It's far
There's
more coherent than like as far as I can tell so far, the narrative is still makes more sense than Kingdom Hearts, but
That's a very low bar. Just say.
super low bar, super low bar. So yeah, man. Just how about you guys? Like,
Nice.
is spring spranging down there? Sprunging
It
down there?
is, and it's been absolutely gorgeous the past like week or two, which has been great. Which is so funny that we had like snowpocalypse a month ago, but here we are, and it's like 70s, which is fantastic.
Yeah,
So
it is weird that there's a juxtaposition. Like basically, like people are like being frozen to death.
mhm,
You know, not
yeah,
even like a month ago, and then it's like now everybody's like, yeah, it's shorts weather.
we're fine. Yeah,
Sweet.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. We had a really cool yesterday. We had a service in the courtyard because we just called it Celebration Sunday, where we had a bunch of baptisms,
Cool.
and we celebrated that together and did some spontaneous baptisms as well, which is super cool. And
Now, you
yeah,
guys didn't do like the Stephen Furtick thing where you had plants. Did you ever
no,
hear about that?
no, we didn't have to because we already had like five scheduled, so it was
Okay.
like a good amount scheduled. But then there were a good amount of people who came forward too, and a lot of them were like already believers for a few years who just hadn't followed through in baptism
Baptized.
yet. Yeah, so but regardless, like there was a really cool story. I won't necessarily get into it, but our the worship pastor at my church was just kind of like hanging out on last Thursday or Friday or something like that, and struck up a conversation with someone who was there. Like I think he was like a electrical worker, or no, he was pest control is what it was, and had a really cool conversation with him. And long story short, he gave his life to the Lord, and he was baptized on Sunday, which was
All right.
crazy awesome. Like just like out of the blue.
Baptize
Um,
those converts, man.
exactly.
And your
Exactly. Here's some
babies.
water. Why not? Well, we won't necessarily get into that.
Sorry.
But anyways, all that to say is it was a really pretty day outside yesterday, which was it was actually kind of chilly when we were setting up, but the service was at 11, and so it was gorgeous. So that was very nice. But yeah, it's been over the past couple of weeks. It's just been busy with things going on. There's a lead up to Easter, so there's definitely that. But then I just started a new class on Romans, actually teaching and interpreting Romans. There's a lot of reading in this course. I was not quite expecting it, but I opened up the syllabus and I'm just like, oh shoot, okay, here we
Dude,
go.
I the last week we were watching The Kids for Jared, and he
Hmm.
was showing because he's doing his like I think it's his doctoral work.
Okay.
Um and he pulled out this that he's like, hey, you want to see something neat? I was like, ah, sure, sure. Like I was not. He comes back from his office or bedroom or wherever with a stack of books, like literally like 2 feet high, and he's like, this is I have to get all this read by July, and he's like, and not just excerpts. He's like the entirety of all of these books, and I was going. It's like, dude, I can't even like finish Anna Karenina or make headway on some stuff. Of
Hmm.
course, and it's like part of his job is to study
Yeah.
deeply but yeah, I was just like, oh man, like that would not be fun.
Yeah, that's something else. Okay, I'm over here complaining about like 80 pages that I have to read in a week. And I say a week, like at the end of the week, by the end of the week, I need like a worksheet and a paper written kind of a thing. So like, 3, 4 days, you have
Yeah,
to
you
read
get
80
yeah,
pages.
but
So
I
it's not
mean,
that much. It's just more
but
than it has been in the past.
reading even like reading 80 pages, okay, in 2 or 3 days with comprehension.
Right.
Like that's
Yeah.
like it's not because it's not just like, oh, like you're sitting down because you could probably read 80 pages in a couple of hours, like 2, 3 hours.
Right. Yeah, yeah,
But it's you also have to like you're probably gonna have to reread it a few
yeah. Hmm.
times because of yeah. Yeah, dude, that's like there's a huge difference between like reading for pleasure and
Right.
reading for like
For
for gain,
quotations,
for
for papers.
study,
No, I'm just
for
kidding.
yeah. No, it's like
It's not just
for
quotations, but
I mean, yeah, but it's like there's like the way that you absorb that material is radically different.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. And it does get one of the books that I'm reading, it gets pretty dense. Um, like that there was a chapter that I read, it was probably like 25, 30 pages, and it was all just about the usage, Paul's usage of the word that's translated as righteous in English, but diakos, I think, is what it is. I haven't taken Greek, so I don't know how to pronounce it exactly. And basically, like the different usages of that word and what it means. And yeah, it got dense because he was like going back and forth between using the Greek word, like the English letters for the Greek word, and then using the Greek letters and the different like tenses of the word too. And so I'm just like, oh, I'm not prepared for this. But I mean, it ended up making sense. It's just like, okay, you have to get through kind of the bit of jargon, like
mhm.
I use that in the technical sense, which means technical. But
Yeah,
anyway.
well, you have to like there's always like, and it's just something interesting that like I was listening to something on like catechizing and catechesis
Okay.
in
Hmm.
general, and it and a lot of people are like, well, um it's not catechizing our children or even just catechizing ourselves is not super popular, but
Hmm.
and I can't remember it's but it is good. And a lot of people say, oh yeah, it's not bad, but I think like I can't remember if it was like it might have been the Reform Forum or maybe it was the White Horse Inn I was listening to, and they were talking about catechesis, and they said like what it, and this is a couple weeks ago too, so it's
Hmm.
like this, but what they were talking about like what that does is it actually provides like a framework. It's like learning a language or learning like
Mm.
actually what they used was like it's like learning to play piano, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so, like, in learning to play piano, at first, it's like a lot of rote memorization and it's very
Hmm.
simplistic. And it's just like, get these forms down, but then it's like, once you have that, though, there's a much broader application. It's like those things, like, when you sort of lock them into like memory and it
Hmm.
becomes rote, for, lack of a better term, uh, that's actually when you can sort of really start to swim in deeper waters. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that's been lost on people. Just I would say sort of like just as a general like sort of like just the emotive or the emotionally centered sort of like culture is
Hmm.
that because it doesn't necessarily produce feelings or anything, but it
Hmm.
actually it's almost it is very much more academic in orientation in the sense that like it is very much about sort of like providing like an intellectual framework
Yeah.
and like sort of that helps you to sort of parse through some of that stuff. And I just
Yeah.
thought like but I just thought it was interesting how and
Yeah.
even when you were talking about like well once you sort of understood a little more the technical context it was like all of a sudden like you could make sense of some of this stuff
Hmm.
and it's
Hmm.
like and that's the problem is that you know that in a lot of ways like and some of what I'm finding as I sort of like I tackle sort of heavier material and weightier material is that I sometimes lack like the necessary technical context to really
Hmm.
sort of be able to apply this and use this stuff properly.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. Yeah, it's and there's a lot. It's funny. Well, just what popped into my head as you were saying that. It definitely I can see how it applies with catechesis, but I think also there are a lot of like loaded terms throughout the Bible, and I say
yeah.
loaded just in the sense of like they carry so much weight that's lost on us today. Like the one that sticks out in my head, just because I've actually like researched this word, done a little bit of a word study. I'm sure there's tons that I don't know. Is the term Messiah, of like how I don't know, growing up in church, that's just kind of thrown around like Jesus is the Messiah, but understanding that as the hope of Israel and like this prophetic figure that was going to bring about the shalom of God. Like it's this huge concept that like, oh yeah, we throw it around at Christmas
it's a
time.
word that actually carries a lot of weight but
Yeah.
because of just the way that we use it
Yeah.
and the way that in a lot of ways we don't pay attention to necessarily like that like yeah that's really interesting like very
Yeah.
cool very
Yeah.
cool
It's fun. Yeah. Those are the fun things that I learn in school that then I get to put into practice. Anyways, so yeah, that's how my couple of weeks has been. Sorry for rambling, everyone.
Oh,
I guess that's
you know
just
what?
how it goes.
I did
Mm-hmm.
forget. While we were out at my, so we spent a day with my parents, and
Okay.
I mean, this is maybe just me sort of flaunting my privilege, so feel to, you know,
I'm already
shame,
offended.
shame me and berate me later on, if you feel it's necessary. But my dad, for his 35th year anniversary for working for the company that he works for,
Okay.
um, they gave him a present, and there were some different things they get, and he had picked up a sound bar with a subwoofer
Okay.
for his 35th year anniversary gift from work. And he had been using it for a little bit, and then when we were over there, I saw it was disconnected, and it was sort of just like thrown in the corner. I was like,
Hmm.
what are you doing with that? And I was just like, I was like, well, if you need help setting it up or whatever. I was just like, that's the headspace I was in. He was like,
Hmm.
I'm not doing anything with it. You want it? And I was like, I'm not gonna say no to free stuff, like,
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
free decent equipment. Yeah, yeah. Okay, please, thank you. And I was like, "Are you sure?" And he was like, "Yeah." He's like, "I can't use it with the surround sound that he had installed surround sound,
Uh,
and he thought that he would be able to sort
Tack
of
it on.
plug, like tack it on." And he's like, "I haven't been able to get it to like do what I needed to." So he's like, I'm just going back to my old setup, and I was going to take it downstairs and maybe hook it up. He's like, but if you're going to use it, he's like, take it. So I got a sound bar with a subwoofer for free, and
Nice.
set that up. And, you know, it's kind of cool because you don't, like, when all you have is like TV speakers, like,
Hmm.
which, I mean, like, you have a TV, so whatever, but like, yeah, that's the fact that I have a TV is like, I'm a few steps, beyond some people, but it was like it was just like all of a sudden it's like, there is like sort of that next level. It's like, listening to like music and even like just watching movies and stuff. It is, man, having decent speakers to watch
Hmm.
that stuff is like, or a decent sound system is kind of rad. Just
Yeah.
throwing that one out there. It's pretty neat. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we had hooked up the studio speakers that I use. Yeah, you can see in the background if you're a patron. We'd hooked those up to the TV because we had watched a live stream of a concert that one of our favorite bands was doing. Anne Berlin. They've been
Hmm.
streaming concerts throughout the past year, and we hooked him up to the TV, and that was nice. And we left him there for a little while, and it was fun. Yeah, it's fun to see kind of the difference. Thing is, we've got young kids, so it's also kind of like, oh, please don't touch those. Like, don't push in the tweeter. Like,
Oh, dude,
that's
I
not
as a
okay.
child ruined
Hmm.
and
Oh yeah,
ruined my dad's speakers that way.
yeah.
Like, um, yo, is it Amberlin? Is Amberlin? That's the bad Christian dudes, right?
No, that's
No,
Emery.
oh, that's Emery. Okay, yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah,
Amberlin. I'm trying to think. Like, but that's like the same era,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay,
Same era.
I
Yeah,
have listened to some Amberlin. That's cool. That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah. They're cool dudes. They're cool dudes. Anyways, um. So yeah, good catch up times.
Yeah.
Only 20 minutes catch up.
Well, I mean,
I like it.
it's been 2 weeks.
Dang it! I thought we were gonna get by.
I'm
Because I noticed you didn't do that earlier, and I was intentionally trying to steer the words so that was not said. And now,
listen, buddy. Like I told you, it's like, you know what? Sometimes I'm just gonna let it slide without saying it at all,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna let you sort of like get in the headspace. So maybe he's
And
not
then
gonna
the
say it,
final word.
and then yeah. But so one of these episodes, it will be just the final word. I'll just be like, the final word is, it's been 2 weeks,
Oh man. Oh, I hate it so much.
or just I'll just read the entire song verbatim.
Thanks. I hate it.
uh, it,
Oh man.
it makes me laugh, so
Yeah.
that's all that really matters, right?
I just laughed through the tears. That's how it goes.
He's weeping to himself.
But I think I've got something to wipe these tears off. called a backlog report.
It's a backlog report. Back in my day, we didn't have backlog reports. You wanted to know what you were playing, you had to walk up a hill in the snow with no shoes, uphill both ways.
And you had to hold the reset button when you turned it off, or it wouldn't save.
And then sometimes when you turned it back on, you had to blow in the cartridge.
And it was a 37-digit password. Okay, anyways, it's funny. Those are all real. I mean, except
those are real things that I think I've done. The not walking uphill both ways.
Exactly. Yes. Everything outside of that. But yeah, man. So what do I have to report on? Like I said, I haven't been playing that much over the past couple of weeks. It's been it's just been busy. It's been busy.
It's been 2 weeks is what it's been, Josh.
2 weeks of busyness. I have actually, as I was listing them all, I have been listening to a lot of books.
Cool.
So that's fun. I finished up Beyond Order. I dove into Live Not by Lies. That was
That's
I was going to
actually
say fun. Not fun, but interesting.
I was looking at it today and I was thinking about picking it up and just sort of like busting through it, but then I got distracted. But
yeah,
more about that.
That's just how it goes. And then I did also listen to this other book that I've been trying to kind of implement a little bit. It's called The Power of When. I know that sounds like so stupid and new agey, but it's basically just about it's called a chronotype, and so like just basically the way that your body, how much sleep it needs, and the best time to do certain things to keep your energy up. Basically, that's basically the problem. Is I read the book and it's a short book. I listened to it all in a day while I was doing stuff around the house. But the problem is that I'm trying to implement it right after a time change, and so my body does not like that at all.
Pennsylvania is actually there's legislation, I think, in Pennsylvania to get rid of daylight savings, or just basically keep it on daylight savings all year long.
Yeah.
Which I would like that's a move, and let's do it.
I like that. I like that. Because, and it didn't even mess me up the first day. It was like after that first day. It's the mornings, man. It's hard to get out of bed. That's really what it is. But anyway, so yeah, it's interesting. I'm not sure how much it's necessarily helping, except that it's helping me be a little bit more disciplined, if that makes any sense. Don't know if it actually works, but it's helping me think through some of these things. And then I started Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. Yeah, because I hadn't ever actually read that one. I've read another one by him, and so yeah, it's good stuff. So been listening to those books. As far as what I've been playing, I actually went down the rabbit hole of Final Fantasy X and finished that game up. And I was saying on the Discord how I think it's the first. Well, maybe not the first, but I was very surprised because it's one of the few games that I finish under the average playtime on howlongtobeat.com, because usually I'm a good 20% over whatever they say it is. But it was like a little under 40 hours is what it took, which for a JRPG is not too bad. It's not, it's not necessarily, I wouldn't call it brisk, but it was definitely quicker than I thought. I was thinking 50, 60. Although I didn't do like any of the side quests. So there's that too. And I have a lot of mixed feelings about Final Fantasy X because I think it has great music. I think it has a great battle system, which is, I'm surprised that they haven't like returned to it or made something comparable. One of my favorite battle systems is the like Bravely and default system. I just think that adds so much strategy. Job systems are great as well. This one, being able to switch out characters in the middle of battle gives you so many different opportunities to do things, because then you also have to think about like the speed of the different characters are a big deal. And then also if you're switching someone out and they're going to be using, a skill or attacking, then you have to consider how much damage the enemy can do and is it worth that kind of trade-off and then the healing afterwards kind of thing. So it made for some really cool strategic stuff, even if it wasn't altogether necessary. Although I would say that it's probably one of the more difficult Final Fantasy games that I've played, because it definitely had some difficulty spikes, especially towards the end of the game. So I had fun with it. It's more of just like the story aspects that I had issue. And I mean, it was a very linear game until it wasn't at the very end of the game when it's like, yeah, you can
Yeah.
go back and do stuff. And that's when I was like, no, I thought I was already done with the game. Like, let's go ahead and beat this. So that's why I didn't finish any of the side missions, which apparently would have given me more understanding of the other characters in the game. So I get that it's kind of my fault that a lot of the characters didn't resonate with me. I think they're touching on some kind of cool themes, like themes that aren't generally talked about in games, although we might talk about them more next episode based on what we have on the docket. But I'm not quite sure that it sticks the landing. There's just so much going against it narratively. I don't like the main character.
Yeah.
And he's kind of like pushed in your face through the whole game, and it's weird because I thought he wasn't going to be the main character. I don't know. I don't know. So I have a lot of mixed feelings. It's probably in the lower half of Final Fantasy games that I've played. It's also the latest Final Fantasy, like official numbered Final Fantasy game that I've played. So what can I say? I'm sure there are a lot worse out there. I just haven't played them. But I did finish up that game, rolled credits, took my backlog beatdown points for it, and then I started up a little indie game called Moonlighter, which is a little.
And that's
Like,
actually a little indie game. Like,
yes,
well, it's a
yes,
bigger indie game, but
that's right.
it's kind of a big deal, but it is an actual like indie jam title kind of thing.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I'm not using that sarcastically this time, like I usually do. Not like the main topic of the episode, the little indie game called God of War. No, Moonlighter. I'm really liking it. I'm not too far into the game. I've only put a handful of hours into it, but it's this nice little loop that you go into a dungeon. The premise is that you run a shop in this town, and this town has some dungeons around. Like the town was built around these dungeons because there's lots of treasure in these dungeons. So you run a shop in town. At night, you go into the dungeons, you kill monsters, you try and go deeper into the dungeons and get better treasure, and then you take all that treasure and during the day you sell it. And so there's two like main styles of play. And one is sort of like the old school, well, I say old school, but kind of like classic Zelda games, like A Link to the Past, overhead, swiping your sword, using arrows and stuff like that. Kind of that overhead perspective, killing monsters and getting loot, trying not to die while you're in the bottom of the dungeon because then you lose all your stuff and it's a little frustrating, but that's basically the loop. But then once you do that, you come back up to the town and you stock your store with all the stuff that you got, and then you set the price. And so you have to kind of learn based on what the reactions of the people who are coming into the store, whether or not it's a good price, whether it's too cheap, whether it's too expensive. And then you also have a way of seeing how popular the item is. So there's the elements of supply and demand that go into that as well. So it's basically like it mashes two little things together. And I mean, it's like a 10-minute run for each one of those little games. You go
yeah,
into the dungeon for 10 minutes, then you come out and then you open your shop and it's like 10 minutes for the day. So it gets really addicting when it's just like, okay, I'll just do one more, just go into the dungeon one more time. And well, okay, now I have all this gear, I can probably sell it. I'll go ahead and sell it in my shop one more time. And then after you do that, oh, but I almost have enough gold to buy a new sword, so let me just go into the dungeon again. And so it gets addicting. And so I'm having a lot of fun with that. But that's all I've been playing. Unfortunately, I haven't touched Nier Automata because of what I talked about, trying to do these rhythms of like going to sleep at different times and stuff like that. I just haven't had much time to sit down and play video games on the big TV screen. It's mostly just been handheld, and so it's only been handheld. So Final Fantasy
Yeah.
X and Moonlighter is
Yeah.
all that I've been up to. How about
Cool.
you? What do you have on your backlog reports?
Well, I mean, I reading was kind of a bust for me this week or this past fortnight. I little bit into a little bit, but didn't really get into stuff the way that I should have. I did start up another audiobook, Warbreaker. It's another Brandon Sanderson,
Okay.
Cosmere sort of thing, and I mean, I was just like, I have this. I'm gonna listen to it, and so yeah, I've been doing that. But as far as reading, like I haven't really touched Commune with the Triune God the way that I should
Okay.
have. I haven't really. I've been. There were a couple times where it's like, oh, I ought to pick up this and just sort of like burn through it, or I ought to like maybe read some Anna Karenina or something. And it's just kind of like, for whatever reason, it's just been kind of like just stalling out on me. And well,
Okay.
whatever reason, there is a reason. It's not a great one, but there is a reason.
Mm-hmm.
I too have been playing Near Automata. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
why I want to say it that way, but every time I say it, I just want to say Automata. But Near Automata, and that game is it's something, man.
Yeah.
I really, it's one of those things where, and I kind of said this to you pre-show, but if you were to strip away like sort of all like of the crazy narrative hooks like that, I would look at you and say, oh, this game's like good. Like it is
Mm-hmm.
a strong good. Like it's got fairly interesting combat. Like the environment's a little like meh, but it's functional, and it's like it's a mechanically fun game with good music, and like but then you throw in this like just bonkers, just like back guano crazy
Mm-hmm.
narrative
Mm-hmm.
that I'm just
Mm-hmm.
going like it's not even like it's like this amazing story. More often than not, like the story's interesting, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
story's like serviceable and it's good even, but it's like more often than not, it's got me going like, what the, like what,
Yeah.
like, huh? Like, and it's like I sort of
What
made the
does this
comment that
mean?
it is hard at times and I'm sure that like it'll be one of those things that the more I sort of play and unlock, the more that like some of these things will like become a little more coherent. I'm like, but it is, I mean, we're not even touching like Kingdom Hearts level of sort of just levels of incoherency, but it is just like sometimes I'm like, what just happened? Like, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
so it's like, what weird thing? It's like more often than not, it's like, what weird thing are you going to throw at me next? And
Right.
which is kind of like anytime, and honestly, anytime I have a game that sort of does that to me, where it's just like it will just like throw like just a screwball at me every once in a while, and say like, how you going to handle this? And I'm like, I don't know. Like that game gets my respect because like anytime a game can sort of like set me back on my heels a little bit and make me go, what?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I perk up a little bit. Like, there's something about that that's, I'm like, okay. Because, like, you know, I've, I've played a lot of video games. I have a
Mm-hmm.
fairly healthy sort of like contextual library. Like, I'm pretty familiar with a lot of tropes and sort of
Yeah.
like, I'm a fairly sort of like experienced, fairly seasoned gamer.
Season. Yes. Yeah. That. You used the
And,
word I was gonna use.
and, like when a game makes me go, what? like,
Yeah.
like that doesn't happen that often.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I pay like my ears perk up and I pay a little bit more attention. So like there's
Yeah.
something about Near Automata that I'm very like, and I was even telling you like I'm kind of like I played the original Near on PS3 and 360
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, yeah, it's okay. It's like kind of weird and I didn't but like I'm actually kind of like jazzed. Like I'm kind of like pumped for Replicant now at this point in time.
Nice.
Just because I'm like, yeah. The other thing, and it's just always a bit of a shout out here, but did fire up Remnant from the Ashes the other night again, and hung out for a couple hours with a friend of the show, Eric Bryant. Just
All
went and shot
right.
up some. And it's just like that game is very cool. And we were talking about it last night, and I said like I really like this game, and like I can't. There's a part of me. It's like I really am sort of like interested in um just to see what that studio does next with that property. Like I'd really like to see them sort of like continue to sort of develop that world and just that system that they have sort of in place and like really sort of refine that because I think like
Mhm.
they have like Remnant has some really great bones and Eric pointed out to me that Gunfire Games actually uh, had a hand in some of the Darksiders games. Um,
Yeah, that's what when I was looking into it. Yeah, it said that it said Darksiders. So
Yeah,
interesting.
which and I happen to be a fan of those games. You know, I did need to go back and finish the second one and then play the third one, but I
Hmm.
really liked the first Darksiders and I did enjoy the second one.
Nice.
But let me look at. Oh, and I did one more thing. So, Final Fantasy IX
Mm.
might be one of my it might be top three Final Fantasies for me.
Hmm.
I really like that game, uh, but it is really really hard to go back to because it's very much a game of its era. Like it's
Hmm.
very much a PlayStation One um, RPG, and it there's a lot of stuff that just frankly I just don't have the time or the patience for. But anyways, friend of the show, Jono, well John, oh geez,
Hadrick.
yes, it was right there, and I was like, brain. Listen, I'm old, but yeah, John Hodrick, Jono Spark himself.
Hmm.
Uh, he had posted in the Discord about the Mog Uri, the Moguri. I don't know how you want to say it, but it's
Yeah.
Moguri mod for Final Fantasy 9 on Steam. So I plonked down like the 10, $11, and I will not be taking
Nice.
any points because I own that on just about everything. Um,
Okay. Okay. Fair enough.
so
Yeah.
it's like this is not my first time buying that game. But I like I said, I plunked down like the 10, $11 for it, and then I installed that that mod, and I was playing around with that the other day, and I was like really impressed because like just like that mod actually sort of made that game sort of feel the way I remember it did.
Hmm.
You know, it plays really well. Like I had some like controller shenanigans. Like I was trying to use my Switch Pro controller, and I ended up just I have a corded Xbox controller that I just ended up using, and that seems to work a lot better. But yeah, so at some point in time, I am going to like circle back onto that and do a replay of Final Fantasy IX because I really like that game. It's a really good game, and but yeah,
It's a good one. It's a good
it's
one.
it's one of like I said, it's one of my favorites. I think like it's just like one of those. It's not the most underrated, which I think goes distinctly to six because
Okay.
I think six is arguably the best. You know, and like this is a matter of opinion, but it just sort of gets snubbed for seven all the time, and that's partially why I hate seven because like people are like seven's the best, and I'm like, but it's not. It's
Hmm.
not even like it's good, it's fine, but it's like solid middle of the pack, you know.
The reasons that it is considered the best were very much in the moment. You
Yeah,
know, it was like for when it came out, those were reasons. I was gonna say solid reasons, but I mean,
I
you
mean
know,
there
like
was
a big part is presentation,
yeah,
and
and
that
I
doesn't hold
just
up.
think like nine is a much better like out of the three PlayStation era Final Fantasies.
Hmm.
The original PlayStation One era, like nine is arguably the best in my opinion,
Yeah.
and it was the like I had played six, and I had played some seven, and I had played some eight, and I emulated four and five. So at that point in
Okay.
time, like I hadn't no, I had also emulated the first one, but I hadn't
Okay.
played two or three. But I had played pretty much all of the other Final Fantasies up to that point, and seven and eight actually sort of had turned me off. Like eight, especially at the
Hmm.
time, like, and I go back and I will sort of like be a bit of an apologist for that game because I think it has this a really interesting system,
Hmm.
but that's about it. Like
Yeah.
everything else, I'm kind of like, yeah. But that system is like, frankly, I reward people who take like chances. And I
Hmm.
think that there's a lot of really cool things about the Final Fantasy VIII combat that get sort of like, it's not to say that there aren't problems.
Yeah.
Okay. It's
Yeah.
just to say there's a lot of things that they did that I thought were incredibly interesting. And just because of like just how train wrecky that whole game was,
Right.
it get like everything gets tanked,
Yeah.
even though there's like, you know, uh,
So I'd say it's similar to two in that like yes, it's interesting and it's got potential, but it has some massive flaws in it.
oh
The
yeah.
fact that you can just draw stuff in order to like drawing stuff is better than leveling your characters is a huge problem. Like there needs to be some way to get around that.
Well, I don't know. There's something about that that just I also sort of like tickles me a little bit. But
Yeah.
and again,
Yeah.
like
Sorry.
it's
Yeah,
not,
we're going too far down the rabbit hole.
I'm not
I do
gonna
have a
like
single hot take though
hot take.
to give. I would say that without Final Fantasy IX, we wouldn't have for Warriors of Light, Bravely Default.
Oh,
That
no, yeah.
that's like the kernel of those games. Just the feel of that game, the fantasy setting, it's not as serious. It's not overly serious. Like even six was serious, but seven and eight just felt like
Well, and nine has like
oppressively
some
so.
serious moments, but it's much
Hmm.
lighter heart. Like
Light,
it's
yes, light. That's a
lighthearted
good
in
word.
sort of its
Hmm.
presentation, in that there's more of a sense of joy in that game and just sort of
Yes,
like whimsy that is
yes.
not
Ah,
present in other games.
so many good words. Yes, all those words.
And nine, I
Whimsical,
just think is like
charming.
I think honestly, just like and at some point in time, definitely sort of need to put this on the like put this on the docket to play through and sort of go through and talk about. But nine has like by far like it doesn't have a job system, but it has my
Right.
favorite implementation of the skills
Okay.
where characters learn skills through the equipment that they wear,
Hmm.
and then after like so much time with that particular piece of equipment, they learn the skill. And so
Yeah.
it actually like it adds another element to sort of equipment loadout instead of just getting the biggest the best. And there's
Hmm.
reasons to own a lot of equipment that you normally wouldn't own.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's a good point.
there's reasons to use a lot of like to pay way more attention to your equipment loadout, which I just there's something, and it's just one of those things where I just out of all of the Final Fantasies that like I mean we've talked about like my like if I could just will something into existence, it
Mhm.
would be just sort of basically a flash art version of Final Fantasy VI, but it uses all that Amano artwork instead of
Huh.
like it would just be Final Fantasy VI, turn based, like
Mhm.
but all the cutscenes, like everything would be rendered in that really like wispy, fashion drawing sort of Amano stuff.
Mhm.
Like, yes, give me like full orchestration, like just like
Oh,
like pull out all the stops, like make that a game, and I will throw like it'll be the money will be thrown
take
at Square Enix
my
so
money.
fast, like. But
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
the more realistic sort of is like I'd love to see nine get sort of really like a good remake where they sort of clean up a lot of the rough edges, like the weird loading battle stuff, all that junk, like really clean it up, pretty it up, and it's I don't think that's going to happen even, but I like Final
Yeah.
Fantasy IX, and it just makes me sad because I think it is one of the most underrated Final Fantasy games because I think it is head and shoulders a much better game than seven, and
Mhm.
but it gets sort of ignored for frankly what I think is its dumber, uglier cousin. Like,
Yikes.
well, and I don't want to pile on seven too much, but I'm going to say one last thing, sort of like poking. Seven is an incoherent mess. It is like completely like that storyline is absolutely unintelligible at times. Like it's just narratively, it's just sloppy. And I don't know. I'm
Hmm.
just, like I said, I'm just a jaded Final Fantasy 6 and Final Fantasy 9 fanboy. It's like my two favorite games just get sort of snubbed for, like I said, the dumber, uglier cousin. But
Yeah, I never got far enough into seven that I know all the intricacies of it. I've had it explained to me. I've had it spoiled, but it's at that point it's so far over my head because I
well,
haven't experienced it. You know, it's just like okay,
and it's the
whatever.
most boring, like the materia system, like, and I know here's a hot take on Final Fantasy 7. The
Here we
materia
go.
system is the most boring like skill system ever
Hmm.
introduced. And there's the reason they haven't brought it back is because it's boring and dumb. And like it's just like, because
Boring and dumb.
characters like don't mean anything. It doesn't matter who you
Hmm.
have in your lineup. Like, you know, I don't know. Like
Yeah.
with jobs, like with job systems and stuff, like yes, you can sort of like it's sort of like the same flex, but like I like the job systems. Whereas I think
Yeah.
materia is just kind of like
Gotcha.
it's a cheaper, dumber version of job systems. Like just give me the thing that actually works and is good
Hmm.
versus this trash that you keep throwing at me. Like
Hmm.
take your materia and shove it.
Do you want it? Do you want to hear something depressing?
What's that?
So you want a remake, a nice remake of Final Fantasy IX. I was just searching on my phone trying to see what are the best selling Final Fantasy games.
I don't,
Top
I,
five, top five best selling. Because I was thinking about this just finishing up Final Fantasy X. I know it sold really well. It's number two. Okay. Number one is Final Fantasy VII. Number two is Final Fantasy X. Okay.
makes me want to
And
vomit.
well, and I'm thinking like, okay, so if they're to remake a game, it'd be 10 because that's the second most popular. You know, the reason they're remaking seven is because it's popular. They know that it'll sell. Number two's 10. Number three, want to take a guess?
I really don't.
It's eight.
I'm gonna be super disappointed.
Eight.
Yep.
Number four, 15. And then number five is 13.
And
So
this is what's wrong with the world.
so
Like,
if you're looking
but
for a remake
seriously,
of Final Fantasy IX,
it's not gonna happen
probably not
because
gonna happen.
people are idiots and buy garbage games. Like, dude,
Yeah.
Final Fantasy 15 and 13 are trash. Like, arguably, like, a lot, like 15, from what I've heard, is
uh,
like it's actually not bad,
mhm.
but it's like nobody like
I've heard it's a mess. No,
yeah, and
like you said, not bad, not bad, just real like throw
dude, I
everything.
mean, there's a
Yeah.
reason people like 13 and 15 specifically are like, a lot of people are like, yeah, Square Enix, they sort of jumped the shark several times here.
Yeah.
Like a
Well,
lot of
and
people,
15 was supposed to be a 13.
yeah, it's, well, and
There's
it's
all
like
that.
there's a reason like a lot
But
of people lost faith with Square Enix,
yeah,
13 and 15, but those things
they
sold like
sold.
a bajillion copies, and
So,
so it's like, well,
yeah.
we're gonna keep just shoveling that slop at you. Just hey, here you go.
There you
Freaking
go.
heathens, freaking
So, the,
Philistines.
okay, final thought on the subject. Maybe what would be super cool. What if we got a 2D HD version of Final Fantasy 9? Hmm? Hmm? You like that?
2D.
The Octopath triangle, Project Triangle thing? Do you
You know
think
what
that'd
I'd
work?
actually rather have with that?
Hmm.
I'd like to see it done in sort of um like a Dragon Quest kind of engine sort
Okay.
of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Because
No,
I feel like,
shaking.
I mean,
Not that those
like don't
are.
get me wrong, I like the 2D HD stuff, but
Hmm.
I feel like not every game, like I definitely think like almost like the Dragon Quest engine would be whatever that is, like whatever they do that in, that style would vibe a lot better. Like lean a lot more into like the cartoony sort of side of all that stuff. And yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
that's just
I
me.
dig it. Well, in the tone of the game would fit something like that too, so
Yeah.
I like it. Anyways, that's our Final Fantasy rant for the evening.
Yeah. Final Fantasy is trash, and if you like it, I hate you. I don't really hate you.
Also, I just
I'm sorry.
finished Final Fantasy X, so spent 40 hours on it.
I don't know, but that's just
Just
like
kidding.
Final Fantasy is like one of those things where I'm like you want an argument for why people suck? There you go. Like 5 best-selling games, Final Fantasy games are all like 4 of them are just like deserve to be thrown on a dumpster fire.
Well, it's interesting to me that when someone says Final Fantasy, because of my early experience with it, I think of the classic ones. My first experience was the very first Final Fantasy game, and I still love that game, even though yes, it has a lot of problems. My favorite is Final Fantasy VI. So that's like firmly rooted in the classic era. I would argue that Final Fantasy doesn't really mean much anymore of
No.
anything because they've tried their hallmark for the series has always been push the graphics, make it a spectacle, and um oh gosh, what was the other thing? The other thing with Final Fantasy, the you make it a spectacle and try something new is what
Mhm.
they've always done. And
Well,
if you're trying to do something similar, then you do a spin-off or something like that.
I know that
And
we said that we were going to sort of wrap this up, but I also here's and you
but
know
here's
where
the episode. We're just doing Final Fantasy
here's
today.
no, but you know what part of the problem is? It started with 7. 7 really pushed that.
I
Like
mean, but it had changed. Like the systems had changed for every game up until that point.
mhm.
So it. I mean that was kind of a key point. I mean, maybe 4 and 6 are probably the most similar out of any of them. If you put it, and I guess 3 and 5, those were almost kind of sequels, just because they're the job system there. So I
But
guess there
I
were
think
some
like
similarities, but you're
the
right. Totally thrown out the window and like bring in something completely new.
like
Yeah,
7 was
I can
just
see that.
like the like we're just gonna like turn everything up to 11 and just like and it's like and don't get me wrong, I thought it was fine at the time, but I don't know. Like I said, I am not in the Sony like or in the SquareSoft like Final Fantasy is the best camp. Like
Yeah.
I'm kind of on the other side where I'm like, actually, I think that's a bit of a turning point for that studio as a general rule, where things kind of got real stupid, real
Hmm.
fast. I mean,
Hmm.
they doubled down on that in 8, and
Yeah.
8 is like arguably one of like even for someone like me who's like it does a few interesting things. I'm like it's like it's
Third
towards the
best
bottom
selling.
of my list, and it's like I'm like and anyways like yeah. Oh, we should at some point
There
in
we go.
time like we should just like dedicate an episode to like talking about just Final Fantasy as a whole and sort
Yeah.
of like because there are some things and like I mean
That would be a long episode because we talk about the just our thoughts on the series and then touching on each one. We'd have stuff to say. I
well
have stuff to say on games that I haven't even played before. So,
yeah this
but
is
and that's not even counting spin-offs. I own what is it, Type Zero HD, whatever, and I've never
I
touched
have a
that one
copy
either.
of
So
that too.
I don't know
I've
anything.
heard it's supposed to be
Yeah.
pretty interesting.
Yeah.
It's like, but I haven't done anything with it.
Yeah. I
Probably,
own 13.
I think
Never
it's my
touched that
brother's
one either.
copy actually.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm just been like holding on to because like I'm like someday I'm like I might get to that. I'm
Yeah.
like
Yeah. It was
probably.
dirt cheap when I picked it up. So
But all right,
all right. Well,
we've we've spent entirely too much time. I've spent
that's
entirely too much time getting worked up over how big a piece of trash Final Fantasy VII is.
well, I'm sure you're sick of hearing us talk for a while. So how about you hear one of our friends talk? This is
Ooh,
a beautifully done commercial by the Techno Funk boy.
boy, boy.
I don't know. It's his turn to do one. Yeah, and I loved how actually I think I put Wes's commercials in twice in a row, but it's because we were playing Ultraman music that I just had to have his commercial in with
Yeah.
Ultraman music last time. So
It made it, yeah, I was like that was I thought it was awesome.
yeah,
So
yeah, Ultraman Zap is
Paul probably hated it because he was just like
it's just like
he hates
fuck.
Ultraman and everything else that's good. But
Not everything, just that in particular. I'm
just that
surprised he like doesn't even want to try it, but okay.
I think he's afraid that he would actually enjoy it and then he'd have to just like he'd have
Fall
to
down
like
the rabbit hole with us.
and he's just like I'm not
Yeah.
doing that. Like which is actually probably the smarter play. But
Yeah, it took me a while, man, but once once
Geed
this went
was
on
just such
sale.
like a, or Geed was
Yeah.
just such like, I was just like, there's a few episodes in, but then I was just like, oh, this is awesome. I love it.
Got me. You got me. It just has heart, and I love it. Speaking of
Yeah.
which, I finally got a shipping confirmation for Jeed.
There you go.
It's crazy. Amazon, you sell stuff and you don't even have it for months. Well, it feels like months.
Amazon's so,
Anyways,
dude. Well,
you're a
I,
mailman. I'm sure you have lots of thoughts about
uh,
Amazon.
I'm not gonna go there. Like
Yeah.
there were a couple, like, now it's something like Jerry was actually preaching on, like, he's preaching on the love chapter. And
Okay.
he's like, so this Sunday he was like, let's talk about something love isn't. And he spent an hour talking about how love is not irritable. And
Okay.
afterwards I looked at him and I said, Jared, I feel attacked. He was like, I said, especially when you said sometimes we sort of look at our irritability or our cantankerousness as like sort of a personality trait. And I
Mhm.
was like, I felt very attacked at that moment. And he laughed. He's like, well, he's like, he's like, I did not have you in mind. But then I thought about like just sort of like how at work, like sometimes, and there was a day last week where I was like ready, like to throw down with a few customers where I was
Mm.
mad. And it's like, you know, and it is just the whole, and I'm going to say something that is not, I have, this is just sort of my gut. There's a lot of people that got the stupid Biden bucks, and instead of paying
Mhm.
down debt or paying bills or being somewhat responsible with it, they're like, nope, I'm buying a bunch of crap off of Amazon. And then when the piper comes, they're going to screech and like, well, I don't have money to pay my rent. And I'm like, well, you had $1,400 like a couple weeks ago. Maybe you shouldn't have bought all, like, you know. And it's just like, and I'm just, I don't know. Like, I don't want to be ugly, but I am exhausted by this crap. And I was
Mhm.
like, and when I saw all that crap come, and it's like, I don't know. I just, I'm like, listen, they'll have to answer for their stuff. And I just need this. So, like, everybody's
Mhm.
going to give an accounting. Like,
Yeah.
what did you do with the resources that were given to you? And, you know, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that like I'm super awesome with money because
Mhm.
I'm pretty not super awesome with money sometimes. Like there are times when but it just was like one of those things where I was like, mother stupid pieces of crap. Anyways,
Yeah.
um
Yeah. I
should
mean,
we
oh, should we?
should well let's just we'll just keep, how long do the videos um for the videos, like how long is a good cutoff point for those, or
I mean, Skype cuts them off at I think 3 hours. So,
okay.
but in terms of, I don't know. I've never like reached out to patrons as far as, hey, do you want us to chop us up? Because I don't chop them up. Like I barely ever do anything to them. I just take
Okay.
the raw
Well,
Skype stuff and upload
we'll
that.
just, if it's 3 hours, then what, like I don't see us going more than that
Yeah.
for the actual topic.
Nah.
And then we'll just do a separate one for the bro hang. So
Sweet.
I
Yeah.
just, it was kind of like, how's this work? Because you know, trying to
Yeah.
be mindful of that too. So,
Cool.
well,
Cool.
let's do this.
Good. All right. Do you wanna take us in? Just because you have the vision of how this episode's gonna go.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So hopefully that commercial from our good friend the Techno Funk Boy was just super pleasing and just super happy in comparison to the grumbling and the ranting and the raving of two disgruntled Final Fantasy fanboys who,
Yeah.
you know, just are embittered by everything that Square Enix does anymore. Well, at least one of them is.
I
The
mean,
other,
yeah, I just picked up Final Fantasy VII Remake for free, so I don't
yeah,
know.
I mean, like, I'll be honest. I was like, I'll probably actually play that because my thing was like, I'm going to play that. I was going to pick it up when they did like the super complete version,
Yeah,
and now
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
well, I got it for free. Maybe I'll try it out.
yeah,
So,
yeah. That's right.
but the
I didn't mention that in the backlog report, but I did finally pull the trigger on a PS Plus subscription, because it was
Yes.
$25. And so
Yep.
like I was like, that's like the price of the Nintendo online subscription. And
Hmm.
I like the fact that you can play NES and SNES games on that. Like I don't ever use the online for Nintendo, but like the fact that you could do that is pretty stinking cool. And so, you throw it in the calculator and
Just
that's like $2 a month. Like
just make sure that
stupid
you're
cheap.
redeeming those games,
Right.
even if you don't have any plans, because
Yeah.
it's like one of those things like it's like there's stuff that I've redeemed and I'm like, I don't know. And then like
Mhm.
6 months later, I go back and I'm like, I'm actually gonna try that, and I've really enjoyed
Okay.
it.
Nice.
So,
Nice.
it's like one of those things, and this month especially, this is a month to jump on to do that.
That's
So
kind of what pushed me was yeah, I don't have too much. It was the same deal. It was like I'm gonna wait till Final Fantasy VII Remake is $5 because that's like usually the trajectory of Final Fantasy games is like they sell so well that they just it's sort of like Metal Gear games too. It's like they just get super cheap after 6 years or whatever. It's gonna be a while. And so I was like, yeah, I've got a passing interest in it. But hey, yeah, now it was free, and now I have Remnant too, so that's
yeah,
cool. Anyways,
Remnant's cool, man. Yeah, Remnant's super cool. Anyways, so we're going to be, and you and I have sort of been, well, by you and I mean I basically sprung this on you earlier in the week, and I was saying like I think we need to do a bit of a format change, and this
hmm
is just something that we've talked about. Like sometimes it just feels like when you're trying to, and occasionally we do have an episode that goes long when it comes to like we're talking about a certain
occasionally,
game
occasionally.
that turns into an episode or two. But I thought uh, I wanted to try and find a solution to that was a little more workable. And I'd been listening to some other stuff, and then I was reminded of a podcast that I enjoy, a literature podcast that I listen to that I've mentioned
hmm
before on here called The Bookening. And I thought I was sort of listening to some of their episodes, and I was like, you know what? I think we could do something along those lines. So this is the first episode into our God of War coverage.
hmm
And what we're going to do here is we're going to sort of talk. It's basically we're going to bring out all our baggage. We're going to sort of air any baggage that we have with it, like history with the series. We're going to talk about
hmm
some of the relevant details. This is like a very spoiler sort of overview sort of thing. We're not going to really worry about narrative hooks, narrative beats, or
Spoiler
not
overview. What?
spoiler free overview.
Okay.
I
Okay.
listen,
Cool.
it's I'm old, it's late.
It's okay.
Yeah,
Just need some clarification.
we'll fix it in post, Josh. Fix it in post. I
Huzzah.
don't even know what that means. I just like saying it. Um, but yeah, this is going to be sort of like we're just going to sort of like talk about some things, broad strokes. It's going to be a bit of a session where, like I said, we're going to talk about some relevant details, like publisher stuff like that. We're going to uh, talk about just any sort of like uh, personal context for
There you
the
go.
series,
hmm
and even for this playthrough, because you played it recently.
Yep.
I've made mention of the fact that I have some history with not just the series, but this game in particular sort of hit at a really sort of kind of interesting point in my life as
hmm
well. And just so we're going to talk about some of that stuff. And then in the following episodes, whether it's another episode or if it's two or whatever, we're going to like try and tackle some of the narrative beats and, themes
hmm
and just, but so let's just start off with just sort of the relevant details here.
Okay.
So we're going to be talking about God of War, the 2018. It's been called a reboot, um,
hmm
but so it's a Sony first party game. It's a exclusive. Well, I think I think there's talk of it maybe moving to PC, but I don't think that's been
Yeah.
confirmed yet.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. As of now, it's still exclusive.
yeah, but it's exclusive to the PS4.
Well, yeah. Doesn't the PS5 version like upres it or something? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know if there's. I mean, I don't know if there, but it's a Sony exclusive.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Sorry.
there, it
Semantics.
was published. It was developed by Santa Monica Studio, which is a Sony in-house first. As a Sony in-house studio, published by Sony Interactive Entertainment. It was directed by Cory Barlog, who is also one of the writers, the lead writers on this project.
Mhm.
Um, I think he also has some experience on some of the other titles as well. He's like the big name that sort of like is attached to this one that
Yeah.
people sort of, in a lot of ways, this was sort of, I don't want to say swan song because that has certain, but this has been sort of like the high mark, the pinnacle of his career so far, as like directors go. But it's like I said, it's for the PlayStation 4 and also the PlayStation 5 at this point in time. But it was released in April of 2018, April 20th,
Okay.
2018.
There you
Um,
go.
and it's
You
sort
can
of
add
an,
up those numbers if you want to. Have a
yeah,
field day with it.
it's a bit of an action adventure, sort of. It's got some RPG-ish mechanics. It's also
Hmm.
a bit of a hack and slash sort of thing, but it's a third person narrative adventure game in a fairly open world.
Hmm.
Um, the one thing that and I feel it's like sort of, and we could talk about this maybe a little bit more later too, but at the time they talked about how it didn't really have loading, but what they were really
Hmm.
talking about is like it hides its loading in
Yeah.
certain scenarios, but it's like it's a clever solution, and I think it's a little admirable, but it's also a bit of a false lead to sort of say, well, it doesn't really, it just it's there's no loading screens. In that, yes, there's no loading screens, but there also is kind of a loading screen in this thing. It's
Hmm.
just the way that they do it is sort of like it's a clever solution. But
Yeah. Yeah, it feels a little different. I will say I didn't know until like halfway, maybe a third into the game, that there was that push for that. Because the other thing is not only that it doesn't have any loading screens, but that it's supposed to be all one shot. Like
yes,
there are never any cuts in the
yep,
shot that you're in. So like even in cutscenes, you're panning around Kratos and the other characters that are going on, but it's never like a hard cut from one thing to something else. Honestly, I didn't notice until it was pointed out. Then it's like, oh, okay, okay, that's kind of
yeah,
cool.
and
Um,
that's pretty cool. It's definitely like something that like, yeah, it didn't stand out to me.
curio. It's
Yeah,
not. It's not a selling point, I would say.
I thought it was cool, and
Mhm.
like, but it wasn't anything that was like, oh, this changes everything.
Right.
Um, so just a little bit of history, brief history here, and I'm just for the record here, folks, I am pretty much reading this off the Wikipedia page, uh, but it is the eighth installment in the God of War series.
Wow.
Yeah, the eighth chronologically, and it's technically a sequel to 2010's God of War 3.
Okay.
Um, Now, typically the series has been based in Greek mythology, but this particular one actually does a bit of a pivot,
Hmm.
and the set pieces that we sort of explore in this are Norse mythology.
Hmm.
Um, so, and which I think is cool in a lot of ways because when I played this book, I had just we were doing that reading project like with a bunch of guys from the book club, and we
Okay.
were actually
Yeah.
reading books, and I had actually just sort of, I know that the reading of Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology and my playing of this sort of like coincided. They happened in a pretty
Nice.
similar window. um but I guess basically sort of like the big players in this game as the series as a general, geez, I'm talking really great. The series as a general rule centers around Kratos. He's he has a few different nicknames, but the Ghost of Sparta.
Hmm.
um but he's he actually at one point in time assumes the mantle of the Greek god of war, um, etc. But yeah, so uh, just I'll take a second here and sort of dip into just my personal history with these games. I have I played the first two, I guess, on PlayStation 2,
Okay.
and enjoyed them. It was one of those things where, like you and I sort of talked about it. It's like these were very sort of like edgy,
Mhm.
sort of very like 90s
You know
aughts
how we just
sort of
talked about
era.
Final Fantasy VII?
Yep, pretty much. But I would definitely say that these I think graphically much better looking than
Mhm.
Final Fantasy VII,
Well,
but it's
right, yeah.
also the next generation in hardware. So, uh,
Yeah. Yeah, it's less where Final Fantasy VII was more like cool techno. This was like cool gore.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot of like this like scantily clad women
Mhm.
and
Or just straight open-breasted.
yeah, and
Just
lots of like heavy on the innuendo, very
yeah.
sort of like whatever. Kratos was just sort of this angry dude who was
Mhm.
not averse to just ripping his enemies' heads off. Now, or dismembering them or like gouging out their eyes or whatever sort of like violent,
Mhm.
macabre sort of grim dark way. Like, and
Yes.
it was just like this angry dude who just would completely just destroy his enemies. And it was
Mhm.
very arcade. The first two games were very arcadey. There was
Mhm.
a bit of a combo system, but
Right.
for the most part, it was just like had this very arcadey vibe. And they were fun. They were fine. They had like kind of like that crunchy, heavy rock soundtrack kind of stuff,
Mhm.
and like in hindsight, I don't think there was anything like particularly spectacular about those first two titles. I've not played God of War 3, but I did
Mhm.
hear that narratively it got like way better. And it's not to say that there wasn't
Better.
like some narrative. Like I heard that 3 was the one where like narratively, like again, I haven't played it.
I
I
heard
just
the
heard,
opposite.
oh
Wow. Okay.
really? That
Mhm.
that the narrative sort of tanked there. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't writing like even though they
Right.
were using like
The
the
great
Greek
Greek
myths
novel.
set piece, they were not writing anything close to sort of like Greek literature, like sort of
Mhm.
this the Odyssey. This is not, um, but uh, I thought they were fun games.
Mhm.
The Kratos was a bit of an anti-hero, and I was like, oh,
Mhm.
these are cool, like, but it wasn't they weren't like really my thing. I did
Mhm.
buy my original PSP was the God of War edition PSP,
Oh wow.
uh, and that came with one of the God of War PSP titles. I can't remember which one, and I did
Okay.
play that as well. But again, like as far as like the storyline goes, it's just kind of like angry dude, and then like, but there's a reason he's angry. Well, he's
Mhm.
angry because he's
Yeah.
an idiot and he made foolish choices, and now he's living under like, was he betrayed? Yeah, but you make a deal with the devil. You
Yeah.
can't be mad about what you reap what you sow, pal.
That's exactly what
Um,
I was thinking is like it's a very Faust Mephistophelian gamble, you know.
yeah, and it's like, dude, like you don't get like, anyways. So that's like, had you prior to this game, had you really played any of the stuff, the other titles in this
I've
series at all,
only
Josh?
played a bit of the first one, and it's funny because I own so many of them. Like I actually, because I've heard that this is a really great series. When I got my PS3, years ago, it was still really late in its life cycle. The PS4 was already out at this point, and so I was looking around at some of the best games, to pick up, and it was really cheap. There's a pack that has all three of them on it, and there's also a pack that has the two PSP games, the
Hmm.
upres, HD version of both of those games. So I had those, and also it's coming to my mind, recalling there was a time when I think it was a mistake that on the PlayStation Store they made God of War Ascension $0. Like it was free to just redeem on your account. And I think it was like it was only for like a day or two that they had that there. So I think it was a mistake, but I did go ahead and just pick it up. So I have it digitally if I ever want to download. Although if the PS3 store is taken down, I don't know what's going to happen. We'll see. Um
Well,
so
interesting.
that's
Just a brief side note on that. I've heard somehow like the thing is like basically you're not going to be able to buy new
okay.
PS3
Okay.
games.
Gotcha.
But
Gotcha.
your
Yeah.
existing
See.
library you should still have access to. They're
Cool.
just turning off the. But
Yeah.
I don't know,
They've kind of
like,
almost done that with Vita.
well, and this is like this goes back to the whole like, and maybe another sort of potential. We'll revisit the sort of digital versus physical,
Yeah.
because this is the problem. If this
Yeah.
stuff goes away, you spend all that money, like,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
just
What
sort of
happens?
vanishes into the ether
Hmm.
because they're like, we're turning this off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyways,
'Cause, yeah, the
um,
servers aren't going to be there forever. It's just naturally
yeah,
what's going to
it's
happen.
just that's going to happen. Anyways, but yeah,
So
sorry to interrupt.
yeah, so I own those many, and now that I'm thinking about it, you said that this is the eighth game in the series. So what am I missing? Because I know there's a three, there's
Well,
Ascension, and then there's the two on PSP.
all
So
right.
there's
Well,
one that I'm not thinking of,
this
or are
is
there three on PSP
we'll
that
just
maybe I just
pull it
didn't
up
know?
here. Yeah, and again, I think it does need to be that the creator is David Jaffe,
Okay.
who has, I mean, he's gone on to some other stuff, but uh, he really just, I'm kind of looking here, collections and remasters. I'm just looking for, so let's see, main series. Come on, just this is the part of the show where I ineptly. Okay, so here we've got a release timeline. Okay, so this is what we have: God of War in 2005, in
Okay.
2007, God of War 2,
Mhm.
God of War Betrayal, also in 2007. I think that might be a PSP title.
Okay. I've never
Um,
heard of that one.
I think, and then God of War Chains of Olympus, which I'm
Chains
pretty
of
sure is a
Olympus, and then it's Ghost of Sparta is the other handheld one, right?
Those are both, I think, yes, PSP titles.
Okay. Okay. So
Um,
I'd never heard of that Betrayal one then. That's the one that I
but
missed.
then, okay, so with the God of War collection for the PS3 in 2009, then in 2010, God of War 3, and then God of War Ghost of Sparta. Then 2011, God of War The Origins collection.
Hmm.
2012, God of War Saga. 2013 is God of War Ascension. 2014 is the God of War collection on the Vita. 2015 is God of War 3 Remastered. Uh, then 2018 is God of War: A Call from the Wilds, which I think is a graphic novel, sort of
Okay.
interactive comic
Yeah. Yeah.
book sort
Yeah.
of thing.
Yep.
And then 2018 God of War,
Yeah.
the reboot, are, and
Nice.
then they have it slotted for potentially to be released in 2021 is the God of War
Ragnarok.
Ragnarok.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
We shall see.
we shall see.
Okay.
So there's a lot of stuff like the collections, like it's.
Right, but yeah, I missed one of those in there. So that, yeah, that makes sense. I was gonna say something. I might be getting. You said the narrative in three was supposed to be good. I might be getting three in Ascension confused. I don't know. I don't know because I
Yeah,
haven't played them.
I don't know. I
As
haven't
far
played
as
either one of them, so
actually playing them, I have played a little bit of the first. I've played a handful of hours. I maybe got like 3 hours in because I know I got multiple powers and a couple upgrades as well. But and part of it is just that I came way too late to the game. Like pardon my pun. But these games are held in very high regard, and
mm,
so going back to them and playing it, it's just like, yeah, it's okay. It's not bad by any means, but it's just okay. And it's pretty much
yeah,
just this hack and slash, press X to win kind of a thing. Yes, there are combos. I get it. But it's kind
but
of
it
meh.
is very button mashy.
Yes, that's a very good way of putting it. On top of that, it did kind of get under my skin how edge lord it felt.
Hmm.
And I will to give it somewhat credit, I would say it's along the same, well, no, okay. I was gonna say it's along the same lines as like the original Doom, where that kind of does the same thing. It's like rock music, and you're just out to splatter stuff on the wall. Just like destroy. In that game, it's demons. In this, it's like anything that comes across your path. Yes, except that I think where Doom doesn't necessarily take itself seriously, like it's a little tongue in cheek, especially like the newer ones. They're more tongue in cheek. Um,
Yeah,
I would say
maybe.
God of War feels like it's asking you to take it seriously, and so it just kind of feels kind of like teenage edgelord, if that makes
Well,
sense.
yeah, and I think that's like it's very like but they're very earnest and sort of like, no, this is an adult game. This has
Right.
got boobs and blood and
Exa-
guts, and it's yeah,
yes.
this is not a game for kids. And it's like, well, yeah,
But
but it's
yeah.
really juvenile,
Right.
and it's like the mentality here is it's pretty yeah, dude, like you're trying to appeal to teenage boys, bud. Like,
Right.
let's
And when the game starts off with a mini game of Kratos jumping in bed with like multiple women, the covers are on. Okay, yeah, whatever. But still, like you are trying to push buttons so that a vase falls off the coffee table right next to him, something like that. I'm
yeah,
just like,
it's like
really? Is this really how this game is gonna like? I already hate this dude, and I've been playing this game for 5 minutes.
like he's such well, and that's like he's not, which is kind of like when they announced this game, when they announced God of War 2018, I was
Hmm.
like, I was kind of like not big on it initially because I was like,
Hmm.
Kratos kind of sucks. I was
Yes.
like, I'm
Yeah.
not sure that I want to play a game with this dude, like
Hmm.
about this guy. And then the more I was hearing about it and the more I was like the stuff that I would read about it, I was like, there came a point where I was like, no, I think I'm in. I
Yeah.
think I'm in because it's like
Yeah.
it sounded like they were going to sort of like and and I think that's the thing, like without going into too much narrative detail,
Right.
in a lot of ways, it's not like what I kind of really like about God of War 2018 is it actually confronts Kratos' past a little bit.
Yes.
And he basically has to come to terms with the fact that he was a giant douche. You know,
Yes.
or maybe that's not the greatest term, but he comes to term with the fact that he was kind of like a garbage human being.
Hmm.
Or in his
Hmm.
case, a garbage god,
Hmm.
and that he was just like he was kind of a piece of crap. And
Yeah.
like you know, and that's something that frankly, and I'll be honest too, like I think part of it was like I kind of looked at this um initially, and this is before I played it, but I was like, is this going to be like a Last of Us God of War edition?
Hmm.
Because it was like, oh, they're including his son, and his son's going to be an AI character, and da 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 da. And
Gotcha.
I was like, yeah, yeah. It was like, and I just think there's so much stuff here with just even sort of like contextually, like
Hmm.
that this game, I would like, this is what I would say. I think you can easily pass on every other God of War title.
Hmm.
Like, if you want to play them, fine. They're kind of like the big dumb action games.
Yeah.
Like you're not missing anything.
Hmm.
And in a way, if you do play the other God of War games before you play this one, it will help to give you some context. It will help to
Hmm.
sort of explain who Kratos is. But the reality is, you're probably not going to like him. You're probably going to think he's a giant tool.
Yeah.
It's going to be like there are moments where they sort of like try to flip that and they try to sort of like play with that, but just it's like you said, like 30 seconds into the first game, like
Hmm.
he's betting some strumpets, and and you're doing this like really awful QTEs to try and
Hmm.
get you know like yeah to shake a vase off of
Yeah.
the shelf or whatever. I'm like,
Hmm.
this is, and again, it's just sort of juvenile, and again, I'm much older than I was when I originally like when I played God of War 1 and God of War 2.
Hmm.
So there's some of that too. And full disclosure, I like those games. Like
Hmm.
I enjoy them. I played them, played quite a bit of them, but again, they're sort of like one of those things where I'm kind of like, whatever. Um
Yeah. Yeah. I mostly agree, except that I would go so far as to not recommend playing
yeah,
any of those
yeah.
games and to just kind of get a basic. I'm sure there are YouTube videos that you can watch that give just a basic overview of the story, because that's sort of what I did. I mean, I think I can't remember if this was in episode or if it was a little bit before the episode started, but I told you I think I've just watched the completionists videos on
Mm,
these games, and so he kind of gives you an idea of the story of the games, and that's kind of so I have again just that basic. I don't know a lot of details, but even knowing that, and this game does a good job of like easing you in. You're not going to know a lot of stuff, and stuff doesn't come out until halfway into the game. Um, but we're not necessarily getting into the story of this new one. It will help, yes. It's not necessary, but that's my two
well,
cents. I
yeah. I mean, and there was stuff like it had been years since I had played God of War 1 and 2, and
Mhm.
there was stuff that I was sort of aware of, but like, it's kind of like one of those things where I'm like, yeah, okay, like,
Yeah, yeah,
it's like it didn't decrease the sort of the narrative impact that some of those story beats that show up later on in the game
hmm,
actually had, like in
right,
reference to like the old stuff. And like I felt like in the new game, in the 2018 version, like they did a fairly good job of sort of like it's not like they just dropped that stuff in there. They
hmm,
gave context and
hmm,
sort of like fleshed that stuff out in meaningful ways, which
yes,
is I don't know, like this game really took and what I think the most impressive thing about God of War 2018, I guess I just want to come back and sort of hammer on this, is that it took what was in my head pretty solid like B tier sort of game where I'm like, yeah, it's fine. You're not
hmm,
missing anything if you didn't play them. And it actually like did something really cool with the franchise and made it relevant, made it important, made it matter.
hmm.
Um,
To where what is it like number 8 on our
yeah.
best game list? I mean, it's pretty dang high on our list. So,
When I think a
yeah.
lot of that just, going back to like, and again, like Corey Barlog's direction, like,
Hmm,
I mean, this guy, like this is his work. Like, and
hmm,
you have to sort of like, I mean, yes, he's the head of a team or whatever. And there are a lot of people, but like, I think like this was his vision and it's like, you can't like, man, that's impressive. It's just
yeah,
really impressive
yeah,
to take a character that I like like had a strong amount of antipathy for, where I was like,
hmm,
I actually kind of don't like Kratos. He kind of sucks.
hmm,
And then it was like, oh, wow. Like it just like to like that whole move is like that's pretty killer.
yes.
Like you have to give I have to give a lot of credit there because like that's just freaking outstanding. Just
I
well done.
wholeheartedly agree with that. And I misspoke or I didn't remember our list. It's not 8, it's number 18. I was thinking it was in
Okay.
the top 10. It's in the top 25. Number 8 is Bloodborne. But I completely agree because yeah, the Kratos is one of the reasons that I stopped playing the game. There are a few others, but yeah, mostly because of Kratos. And I do think the yeah, this isn't even the story episode. In a nutshell, though, I will say he did it very well because he is still the same character, but he has different motivations now. One, because he's older, and so this is actually, you get to see a character arc. He's growing.
Yeah.
And two, because he's in this role of a father, and that's huge. It makes a
Well,
big difference in who he is and how he relates to his son because he recognizes the responsibility that he has. So you
and
see in this game him like wrestling with that, not doing a great job, but
we will definitely talk about some of this because in a lot of ways this story is very much a redemption story for Kratos, but that redemption arc actually starts before this game.
okay,
Like
okay,
and so there is that the call to the wild or whatever that
hmm,
um a call from the wilds. It is like I said it's a comic book thing
hmm,
that I really recommend reading that because so
okay,
just just talking about like sort of Kratos was just big angry dude with swingy knife things.
yeah,
And he was just like he wasn't really a character as much as he was just like angry.
hmm,
And just like yelled a lot and stuff like that. And just I think even before this game, so we're actually sort of even catching up with Kratos like there's been a ton of work that this dude has has done in order to sort of like move beyond just being like the angry, you know. And it definitely, like, there's a lot of stuff that sort of opens up that you experience and walk through in the game, and some of that is because like he, you know, because of his son and being like learning to be a father and all of that stuff, you know. But some of it was like, you know, he even coming out of the other games, it was just like there was a turning from his sort of bloodied, violent past,
Hmm.
even, you know, prior to this game, which I thought was, you know, anyway, that comic book thing is actually a pretty worthwhile little sort of like flip through,
Nice.
in the sense that it sort of demonstrates, it demonstrates like just sort of like that Kratos has been doing some work on himself. But I did want to sort of talk to just for a minute, like, and it's come up on the podcast before, but another reason that this game sort of hits me the way that it does is like, one, I've made no bones about the fact that I have a bit of an anger issue, and
Mm.
I've really wrestled with that, and so in some ways, playing through this, Kratos was a very sympathetic character as a man, you know, or in his case, I guess, like a god wrestling with his anger and how to sort of live with that and to not be enslaved to it.
Hmm.
And I think there's some really interesting stuff and story beats that get worked out through that. So that for me, there was a very sort of like, I was very simpatico with a lot of that stuff, and it spoke to me. But I think too, um, the game is ultimately sort of about fathers and sons.
Hmm.
And when we were playing it, and this is something that you and I will sort of do a bit of a deeper dive into it. Um, I was processing basically. We had brought two boys into the house, and we were fostering them with the hopes of adopting them. We had actually were
Hmm.
planning on adopting them, and it didn't go through because the oldest boy made a decision that he didn't want to stay in our home. There were a lot of like there was a lot of like tension, just there was a lot of like heartache there and
Yeah.
struggle, and it's just it was
Yeah.
very rough in a lot of ways. And you know, Megan and I have talked about it, and I've talked about it with other people, and it's in a lot of ways it was really um putting a lot of stress and strain on the marriage on,
Hmm.
and just it was just a pretty bad situation overall. And so, like, you know, but it still hurt, and frankly it
Yeah.
still hurts. You know, there are days when I think about those boys, and I get sad, I get angry, I get, you know, like all of the things. um and just I think about what could have been, what, you know, frankly, and sometimes in my opinion what should have been, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's a tough, that's tough. And so I was, those things were very fresh. Like that experience was very fresh, and in a lot of ways it was a a bit of a, you know, and we've sort of bandied around the term playing through the pain, but this game in some ways was a way for me to, provided a bit of an outlet for me to sort of like work through some of my heartache and my pain. And I just thought like it
Hmm.
was it's just like you can't, for me this game will forever be tied to that time period where it's like, man, I was just like walking through some pretty heavy stuff, and here's a story that sort of like hits on some notes that I got. And you
Yeah.
know, because like in that you can't help but feel like, you know, like our intent was to bring these boys into our home, to to adopt them, for them to be our sons. And it didn't work. And it didn't work. And it's not to say that we didn't fail at things, and that there were areas where we could have done X, Y, and Z differently, you know, because you can always sort of go back and what if
Yeah.
something to death.
Yeah.
But you know, and again, not to get too, but it's like Kratos has to, in a lot of ways, has to deal with his failures as a father,
Right.
and I had to
Yes.
deal. I was dealing with, you know, supposed imagined and then actual failures as even in a very limited capacity a father to those boys.
Hmm.
And it just it's one of those things where like I said, like I'm interested in sort of looking at the topic a little bit more in depth further on down the line. You know,
Hmm.
we are going to, but it was sort of just personally, emotionally, like that game sort of hit me like it was like a perfect storm for me.
Mm.
And so
That's actually really interesting. If you don't mind me kind of following this just a little bit longer, is because of its roots in Greek mythology. There is a lot of that, a lot of the Greek storytelling, but storytelling, but also putting on plays and things like that. But a lot of Greek tragedy.
mhm.
There's an element of catharsis that it tries to bring out. Like a lot of what it tries to do. The reason that they can be so tragic is to help the person experiencing it, whether it's reading, but those were traditionally oral, right? So they're presented in a different way. But they're presented so that you can experience this in some way in a bit more of a safer context and grow and learn from the failures of these tragic characters, and actually feel some of the pain that they are experiencing. And that's why a lot of those Greek tragedies are so tragic. You think of like some of the horrible stories like Oedipus, and
Mhm.
just how, like, why would you think up such a horrible story? Well, it's to train you. It's basically like mental toughness in sort of a way that you can experience. And also because like you're constantly at war, and so you are going to experience the death of friends and things like this. And so to see that in someone else, and to see that in these heroes in these Greek stories, was to bring in this element of catharsis with everyone who's present. So it's really interesting to me that you experience that on a somewhat, on just a different level for a game like this, because this is um what we've talked about, like the earlier games in the series were trying to be adult in a very juvenile way. This one actually does. This one is actually much more mature. Like the themes that it gets at are much more mature
Mhm.
because they have to do with relationships, not because they have to do with ripping people's heads off, which happens a lot in this game. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, yeah, you're
There's
fighting.
language, there's
You're
gore. It's all over the place.
yeah, I mean, like, and
It's
that
not for
that is
kids.
definitely like this game definitely sort of yeah. I and this is sort of a good little, I guess, a good little bit of a segue too,
Hmm.
to talk about just sort of like mechanically. Um, you can sort of see the roots of the series in this game,
Hmm.
but it does it in a way that it just again is way more refined.
Yeah.
And I don't want to necessarily use the word elegant, um, but it's like, I mean, dude, when you're fighting like the frost giant dudes,
Hmm.
and then you're like basically like impaling them on their own big
Yeah.
stick or whatever, sort of like,
Yeah.
yeah, they're
By like
definitely
hooking their
like,
nose and
yeah,
slamming him to the ground. Yes, yeah. Hmm.
there's like, I mean, it's still like some of that is there, but it does feel like even a little more, I don't want to say restrained, but
Hmm.
it's not as edgelordy. Yeah, it's just not as like, it's not visceral for the sake of being visceral.
Hmm.
It's like, it's not like just like, oh, see how much, like how many buckets of pig's blood we can get into this one.
Yeah,
It's more
yeah,
of like, no, this is just a brutal context that
right.
these characters exist in. And and Kratos is still a pretty cranked dude
Yes,
who
yeah.
is like, he's just like, oh, you're gonna step to him. Like he's like, well, I'm the Greek god of war. I'm going to show you
I
exactly
am
what that means,
gonna rip you
and
apart.
I'm going to dismember you. And I think to sort of be fair, like you do end up fighting like a lot of like Draugr,
Hmm.
which are basically Norse zombies,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
like undead Viking kind of guys. It's all like mythical creatures and stuff like that. Which, and again, we touched on it, like I'm thrilled to death that they are sort of in, like I said, this is sort of like a bit of an entryway too for I think the success of uh, God of War 2018 can, in some ways, you can actually see some of the outworkings of that is like the Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
I think like people are like, oh, games with Vikings are rad,
Yeah.
and yeah, so
Yeah.
it's and maybe that's just me sort of like drawing lines that don't exist, but
Hmm.
I can't imagine. I mean, maybe Valhalla would exist without God of War 2018, but there's a part of me that just kind of finds that unlikely.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's also been a bit of a Viking sort of Viking fever
Resurgence. Yeah.
resurgence. Yeah, that's a good word. And just pop culture in general. So,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Avengers and Thor helps.
well, and then
It's
there's
just easy
that the
introduction.
Learning Channel show, The
Oh, that's
Vikings.
right. Yeah. 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 That's right. I forgot about that one. Yeah.
So they're
Yeah.
kind of like they are experiencing. There's a fairly
They're so
popular
hot right now.
anime. Vikings are so hot right now. Um,
Really? A Viking anime. Interesting.
yeah, I forget what it's called. I watched like the first season of it. It's good.
Okay. Hmm.
It's pretty wild. And it's pretty bombastic and
Yeah. Well.
but uh it's yeah, I don't know, but I do I did want to take we had talked about a little bit mechanically talking
Hmm.
about some of this game, and in a lot of ways mechanically it does sort of like, again, it almost pays homage to the earlier games in the series, and again, I can only speak from the first two, but this is a much more refined system. Like there are some RPG-ish stat element sort of
Yeah.
things. There's like you can customize some loadouts with the runes and everything. I mean that the axe is awesome.
Hmm.
Like that
Yeah.
like you fling the axe and it comes back. Oh, that feels so good. Every like
Yes.
it's like one of the best parts of combat. Like it's like if somebody's like, "What's your favorite thing about God of War?" Like initially I would have been like, "That axe feels great."
Hmm.
Like because you chuck it around and then it does sort of the Mjolnir like whips back into his hand.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
And
it's
for a while at the beginning of the game, like you can use that for a good amount of damage. Like you can actually take out, you almost use it like a sniper.
hmm
Because if you can't get to an enemy, you can hit it in like one or two hits, it's dead. So yeah, it's the fact that it is so versatile is really cool and like believable in world too.
hmm
It's like this magical axe that you can
Well, it's I
that
mean it's
comes
sort of
back.
it's like Mjolnir.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah,
you fling the axe and then you like hold out your hand and whoop. Yeah, it's
yeah.
like Thor's hammer. He flings
Hmm.
the hammer and it and and then it comes back to his hand and it's like I don't know, I feel like the mechanics behind just the combat in general, I
Hmm.
remember just really, it's not the most technically, like this is not like a Souls like
Yeah,
level
it's
of
not the most
technicality in
technically
combat.
demanding, but
Yes,
it
that's a good
does
word.
give you a lot of options, which
Yeah.
is really cool because you don't have to use them, but they're there to make everything go a lot smoother. Like you can rely on the same combos if you want to. Of course, you'll probably come up against an enemy where that combo is garbage, and you'll have to learn something new. But there's so much more. Like I was surprised. You're unlocking things until the end of the game,
Yeah.
basically. Now I
Yeah.
know you did everything in the game. I didn't. I
Yep.
barely did. Well, I did a handful of side quests, but I know like
I killed all the ravens. I fought all the
oh
Valkyries.
my goodness, ravens are annoying. I never fought a Valkyrie, so I don't even know what
Dude,
that's like.
like legitimately, I would encourage you to maybe go back in the
Hmm.
next 2 weeks if you have it still installed. Go
Yeah.
pick a fight with at least one of the Valkyries because they
Okay.
are some of the best fights in that game. Like
Interesting.
mechanically, the most challenging. I would
Hmm.
recommend them on normal. Full disclosure, I played the entire game on normal. I did dip into
Mhm.
hard for a little bit. Um, and then I was just like, you know what? I don't want to. and, um,
They weren't
but
kidding.
and then I actually, to beat the Valkyrie Queen, I did have to kick it down to easy
Oh,
because like even as geared up and as sort of tweaked as I was, like I just could not get an upper hand on her at all. Like
mhm.
it would be like one of those things. It was like 5 or 6 times in a row where I would get like just a little ways away, and then there'd just be something where I was like, no. And so
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna like this game sort of broke me, and I was like, I'm just
Yeah.
gonna turn down to easy, and I'm going
I'm turning
to
into old Kratos right now. I don't want
I'm
this to happen.
I'm just gonna like stomp on you, and we're gonna like call this a day.
Yeah.
Um, so it's but yeah, it's I I got the platinum on this. I've have been tempted to sort of like in sort of preparation. I was like, do I kind of want to reinstall this and maybe I'll
Mhm.
play it again. And then I'm also like, but I'm deep in the throes of Near Automata at
Yeah.
this point in time, and I'm
Yeah.
like if I'm being honest, like I'd reinstall it and I wouldn't do anything with it.
Yeah.
So
Well, so we haven't mentioned also is that there is a lot of content in this game.
yes.
For an action game, I mean, it's a good 20 to 25 hours, just like straight playthrough. I mean, that's what I put in, and I didn't do a lot of the side quests as we've talked about. I was surprised if you listen to previous episodes where I was talking about. I was surprised at how much content is in this game. I'm not used to action games being this long, and so that's part of the reason why I didn't do a lot of the side quests is because I was already like, whoa, this is it's not it doesn't drag. Don't get me wrong. It just wasn't what I was expecting a shorter game, and it wasn't. It was longer. So, but it's definitely a good thing. And yes, I should go back, but then I'll have to relearn the controls in order to get good. And I don't know, man. But like you, I'm still playing Nier Automata, so I want to finish that one up first for sure. But yeah, there's definitely a lot more for me to see, a lot more to do in the game. Um, you brought up a bit ago that, and I completely agree with you, that there is something about this game that it doesn't feel as it doesn't feel the combat doesn't feel as like edgelordy. The gore doesn't seem as in your face, and yet, as I think about it, I mean, it is a very gory game, and it does kind of revel in that because of the certain kinds of attacks that you can do to just finish off enemies. It does, pan the camera in. There are no cuts, so it's just like one shot. So it pans in, you see the enemies getting ripped apart. But I think that has to do, it's probably the narrative context. Because, like
Mhm.
you said, it feels like a brutal world that they're in. But
Well,
Kratos and Atreus are not doing it necessarily out of spite. It feels like self defense.
Well, and that's
It,
I was gonna say, like, given the Norse context, is like, you know, like I think a lot of times like we don't always think of it like when we read these stories, like we almost read them with sort of like a like if you're reading Norse mythology, which one, like seriously,
do it.
Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology book is
So much fun.
fantastic.
Yeah.
It's so much fun, but like, and I think he does a really because there is sort of a bit of whimsy but like
Hmm.
and charm to these stories, but there's also like some threat. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
when you look at the people that these stories came from, Vikings were like, I mean, there was a reason people were afraid of Vikings
Yeah.
for hundreds of years. Um, because they were the most like, and they lived very brutal existences, and so like when you sort of like, very sort of like, you know, harsh climbs, just harsh conditions
Yes.
across the board.
Yeah.
And
All
so it's
around.
like, it's like that's sort of like contextually, yeah, like I would say God of War 2018 sort of vibes with that. And like,
Hmm.
yeah, it's like, yeah, it doesn't feel like it's not like they're doing it just to be like, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Whereas Whereas like in the original God of War stuff, like it's just like Kratos is just angry and he's just going to be like gnarly because that's what angry Kratos does.
Hmm.
Whereas this one, it's like, well, you have to sort of dismember the Draugr. You have to like,
Right.
like this is very much a kill or be killed in
Hmm.
environment and
Hmm.
or and I don't know. Yeah, I hadn't really thought through that entirely.
Yeah.
I did want to sort of just touch on this. You talked a little bit about the length.
Hmm.
And so I just pulled up the how long to beat metrics here. For the main story, they're saying about 20 and a half hours. So about
Okay.
21, 22 hours probably for most playthroughs. Uh, Main plus extras is 32 hours, but for the completionist route, 51 and a half hours.
Oh.
So,
Again, that's an action game. It has RPG
mhm.
elements, but it's an action game.
And I probably
Open
put
world,
about
but
55, 60 hours into it.
wow.
So, I mean,
Dang.
because like I said, I also did everything.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, like all of those like running, like, yeah, and we'll talk about that, but like all like, there's uh, some of the different challenges and like uh, there's a few levels or biomes or what,
Hmm.
realms or whatever you want to call that
Right.
are
Yeah.
really interesting. Is it Nidhogg? I
Nidhogg.
can't. No, Nidhogg is something else. Uh, the where the dark elves live or the dwarves or what?
Oh. Uh.
Muspelheim,
Okay.
or is that? It's yeah. Anyway, we'll get into that. That one, I really there's something about that loop, that just like that realm that I was stuck there for a few hours because I was just like obsessed with. Um, yeah. Anyways, yeah, it's. And I don't know, like too, I really did appreciate. There are so many things about this game that I really did just like. It does so many things so well that I think. I mean, I honestly think it deserves its place on our list.
Hmm.
And it's hard to you know, eh, eh, just like anything, like this game will sort of be is confined to its time. And so
Hmm.
maybe in 10 years it doesn't belong on a top 100 games of all time list or whatever, but frankly, I just think it's just all around one of the best games I played in a long time, that year. I mean, and that year was
Hmm.
a heavy hitter for games, period.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Spider-Man.
Spider-Man. Which I don't get me wrong, I really like Spider-Man, but I
Hmm.
think God of War was just the better game.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, it's just I am looking forward to diving into some of the narrative themes and stuff, and
Yeah.
just the way that some of the more thematic elements. But this I just I thought it would just be good to take some time and sort of like flesh out some of the other things that we tend to sort of like gloss over and
Yeah.
sort of like try to run through. So is there anything, before we sort of wrap things up, you know, anything else that you feel like you gotta say?
Well, I mean, I agree with you that it's a really good, just like all around package,
Hmm.
because it does so much really well. I'm trying to think of like issues that I had with the game, and they're really more nitpicks.
Hmm.
'Cause like the combat's really good. It can definitely get complicated. So you do have to kind of acclimate to it. Um, I would say it's actually not a very difficult game. I died a bunch, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it's not that hard, and you continue to kind of learn different things, and you have control of the difficulty also. So, it can be, certainly. Also, I didn't do side quests. I didn't fight the Valkyries, so I'm sure they're way harder. So there's things like that in there. I talked about on previous episodes just the sense of like I never really felt like I was in control of Kratos, even though I am, but story wise, his character like I couldn't make any decisions on his behalf. I was just playing his body whenever he fought. But again, this is just a nitpick because of the type of game that they wanted to make. You can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not a choose your own adventure game. It is like you are going to play this story that we've written, and they do it really well. So, so it's all like the only things that I can say. I'm trying to find things to say that are negatives, and it's just like no, they're just little things. Like it's nothing that's bad about, like, it really is a very good, as we mentioned before, it definitely earns its M rating.
Hmm.
This is not one to play with kids, just because in my mind it's language and it's gore is
Hmm.
really what it is. And so I say, little, a 16-year-old, if you think your 16-year-old is mature enough to handle that, then cool, because there's no sex at all. I mean, was there any that I don't specifically recall even like talking about it, an innuendo. I don't
Hmm.
know, but there's certainly not anything shown. So,
Yeah.
but what were you
Yeah.
gonna say?
No, I think that, well, and it's like you said, it earns its M rating, but I think it also takes that M rating seriously,
Yeah.
where it's like, where sometimes it's just like, and again, it's like, it gets the R because, you looking at like maybe things from a film, a perspective,
Hmm.
in film, it's like it gets the R because, well, it's heavy content
Yeah.
and just,
Yeah. It's like
you know,
Gladiator.
yeah,
You
or
know?
like American History X, or it gets the
Mhm.
R because it's just basically a skim flick, you know,
Yeah.
and it's like,
Yeah.
like American Pie is a freaking R, and all that is like,
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
it should be rated R if it, should be. Uh, I can't, I cannot imagine a world where that movie is rated PG-13.
I
Like if
don't
it's
know. I
rated
haven't seen it.
PG-13, someone on the censor board needs like just beaten. Like,
I'm not even sure that I want American Pie on my Google history, but here goes.
um,
uh, oh, it didn't say right off the top, but so here I go wiki diving for American
oh my.
Pie. Oh, it like doesn't even say what the heck.
I'm pretty sure no, see,
It's
I'm pretty
gotta
sure it's
be.
rated R.
It's gotta be.
Um,
All this is gonna be chopped out. This is for patron ears only.
American
Uh,
Pie rated.
sorry,
This
the
is like
title this is just for, it is R. Yes, IMDb. Yes, it is
for
R.
strong sexuality,
Um,
crude sex. Yeah, it's just like
the first the first sorry, again, this will be cut out and then you can continue with your thought. But the first user review on IMDb, the title, funny teen sex comedy.
yep.
Yeah, what were you saying?
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, it's just like it's not crude, it's not sort of like edgelordy. It's
Right.
just it's like that's the rating it earned because that's the rating it actually earned.
Hmm.
Because it actually deals with some heavy, like, it deals with grief. It deals with, coming to terms with a troubled sort of, I'm not trying to use that word lightly, but like, you know, a sordid history. It's
Yeah.
like there's a lot of like weightiness just in the themes that this game sort of tackles. And, I mean, without getting into spoiler territory, part of the game is like Kratos is Kratos figuring out his relationship with his son, and but at the same time he's dealing with the grief of having lost his wife,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
like, and that, folks, like, I know it's like if you want to screech about spoilers at the very beginning of the
Oh,
game,
yeah, no. It's
like
it's the funeral scene. You open, like, you turn on the game and that's what's happening. Like,
yeah,
you never actually
so
meet her. This is like literal first 5 minutes. Yeah.
yeah, and it's
So,
so that's not I don't qualify that as a spoiler. It's
yeah.
just like, you know and but it is just like, there's so many like burdens, like, that's just weighty material, period.
Yeah.
Like, and
Yeah.
then, given the context, I'm like, even the violence feels earned,
Hmm.
whereas
Yeah.
like a lot of times it's just like, like a good sort of point of comparison is Doom. Like Doom 2016, I love that game. It's
Hmm.
like is a ridiculous gore fest.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's gratuitous, but it's also very intentional. Like
yeah,
it's very much like nodding and winking at you the whole time. They're just like,
yeah.
wasn't that cool?
It's like, you just chainsawed that demon in half.
Yeah.
Rad.
Hmm.
And it's like
Yeah.
it wants to high five you and then shotgun a beer. Um,
Yes.
whereas,
Exactly.
God of War 2018 does not do that.
Right.
Um, and it actually, I think in a lot of ways too, like, I think something it does, and I mentioned Last of Us, man, I was like, oh, I was trying to wrap this up. And then it's like, yeah, here we go. Brr, brr, brr. Last of Us, people talk about the violence in that game.
Mm,
And it's like how, like, and dude, it makes you feel kind of like, ugh, because it's just like,
yeah.
it is so visceral. That violence has weight. And I would say, like, I think God of War isn't as sort of like far down that scale, but the
Hmm.
violence has weight. It has like, it's not just like sort of like for giggles, and like I said, it's not just chainsawing a demon in half or whatever, and
Yeah.
Gibbs just like exploding out of it. It's like, even in that, that feels meaningful, which
Yeah.
is, that's a bit of a feat,
Yeah.
frankly, in my
Yeah.
opinion,
Well,
especially in our market.
yeah, and especially after coming off of, again, games that I would not recommend, and a lot of it is largely due to the main character. So to have that actually feel, to have that flipped on its head while still maintaining the same character, like he's just at a different part in his narrative arc. That's that's really well done
Yeah.
that you can actually pull that off. I did think of one other thing, and it's again a total nitpick, but I was surprised at how many threads that they leave open. I'm really trying not to give any spoilers. Threads that they leave open in this game in anticipation of the next game. Because this one does tell a story, but there's also a lot of exposition on the world and things that happen that is intentionally left for what comes next as opposed to really answered in this game. So I'm framing this as a negative. It's not even necessarily a negative. It was just surprising to me. Like, oh, okay, this story is not done. There is certainly more to come. So
Yeah, it's yeah. Yes. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I am looking forward to here in a couple weeks actually sort of like diving into some of the narrative bones. But I think
mhm.
we have I think sort of we've chewed this one up enough, I think,
Yeah,
so far at this
yeah.
point in time, like, uh but yeah. Uh so yeah, Josh.
Okay,
Where
sorry, I
does
wasn't
that
sure
take
if
us?
I wasn't sure if you were going somewhere else with that. But yes, so we've given our thoughts on the context of the game and sort of our own like experiences coming into the game, but I'm sure that tons of people have lots of different experiences as well. Maybe this hit you in a different way than it did for us. Even though we didn't necessarily talk about story, we'll get to that eventually. But we'd love to hear from you if you have stuff to say on the game and the way that it does certain things as well. There's tons of ways that you can reach out to us, and we can talk about all this stuff even on the next episode. We'll bring up some of the conversation, but we can also talk just straight on social media. On Twitter, our handle is at @BBDowncast. You can email us at thebacklog@gmail.com. We've got our Facebook group, the hashtag Backlog Book Club, and we also have a Discord server. Just let us know and we will send you a link to get in there. That's a lot of fun. Or if you just want to reach out personally to talk more about some of this stuff, there's tons of ways you can do, PSN, GG, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that fun stuff. I generally go by Broccolope, and Nate goes by.
Nate_McKeever.
Yeah. And if you
Yes.
dig what you've heard this time around, we would love it if you rated and reviewed the podcast. Hopefully, you're subscribed to this because next time there's more God of War talk. And share with your friends, more the merrier.
Yeah.
Sharing is caring, as they say. And we do also have, if you want to support us, we do have a Patreon. That's just patreon.com/the backlog breakdown, where you can get uncut episodes. We did cut out some stuff from this episode already, or our bro hang episodes where we just kind of talk about whatever the heck we want to talk about. And you can get video if you want to see what we look like for some strange reason. We have that available.
If
for
you
our
want to
patrons
see
as well.
what two tired guys look like
Yep.
every other Monday night, you know.
That's right. And you know what? I didn't say this earlier, but you mentioned it was a little too serious, and I didn't want to immediately take it in a joke direction. But you mentioned how you relate to Kratos and his anger. I relate to him on a different level as a bald man with a little bit of a beard. So
You
just
do
saying.
the, just paint half your face, like put the big red streak on your face.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'd look super intimidating at 5'7", you know,
Yeah.
walking
Hey,
down
dude,
the street.
I'd be scared. I'd be scared.
Oh man.
But
But anyways, we are
mostly
also
I'd be scared because it'd be like, dude, what's wrong with that guy?
yeah. It's like that it's like when you were in high school and someone had just seen The Matrix and they came to school in like a trench coat, you know, and it's like, "Oh, yeah, what's going to happen here?" Yeah, exactly. But we are also a part of the Play Well Network, which is a bunch of podcasts, our friends, where we talk about nerdy topics and talk about redeeming those things and some of the best stuff that's available. Also, Henshin Dad podcast is on there. Tales from the Rusty Speeder, maybe another what's that called? Active Play podcast. What are those? I don't
Well,
remember.
it's a live play, real play.
Real play. There you go.
Is that?
There
I
may
don't
be
know.
another real play that's joining sometime soon. We'll see. And then also the Techno Funk Boy, which is just all things nostalgia, all the stuff that made us nerds. Anyways, Playwell Network,
Yeah.
great bunch of podcasts if you're interested in checking out any of that as well.
Yeah. So, well, we have kind of done our thing, and we did what we came here to do tonight, Josh. In the meantime, what should they do?
Guys, you keep beating down your backlogs, and we'll keep breaking down the benefits.
Yep.
Boy.
Well, and the final word goes to Kratos. Boy.
Of course, because it had to be. It had to be. Of course.
Boy. Of
Boy.
course. Boy. Oh my.
I love it.
All right.
I love it. Okay, I'm gonna stop Skype, or I'm gonna end the Skype call just so that the video ends, and then call me back when you're ready.
All right. I'm gonna take a pee break and
I like it.
maybe grab a brief snack. So this is, what episode is this?
73.
Jeez, I wish I could do numbers.
7 and 3 make 10. Just remember that.
Oh, 7 and 3. Episode 73. GOW baggage, I guess.
Oh, how did I not bring up the worst thing about this game? It's
What is
named the same thing as the first game.
Oh,
Come
that is a pretty
Name it something else.
something else. Anything else, boys. But
Boys.
boys.
Okay.
I'll be back here in a couple.
See ya.